So let's get more detail into this concept of isolating code, where there's a whole blob of stuff that happens when you, let's say, make a request to a web app, but we want to be able to test the different pieces of that interaction sort of in isolation. And to drive this part of the discussion, we're going to pretend that we're adding a new feature to Rotten Potatoes, which is to look up a movie in TMDB, which is the sort of open access movie database. So here's our feature format. As a lazy moviegoer, so that I can add movies without typing in stuff manually, I want to be able to look up a movie by its title in TMDB and then populate the Rotten Potatoes entry from that information instead of entering it manually. And as usual, the feature might map to multiple scenarios. One scenario, which is a happy path, is I look up a movie and one or more titles actually matches. A different one, a sadder path, might be I look up a movie but no titles match. So, you could sort of write out what these scenarios would be, and you can imagine doing some cucumber steps. And the cucumber steps at some point are going to evaluate, if we're doing this first happy path, one or more titles match, you can imagine the cucumber scenario will say something like, then I should be on the search results page and I should see the name of whatever I searched for, right? Something like that. By the way, before we go further, as a matter of architecture, let's clarify one thing. When we say that we want to look up a movie by its title in TMDB, probably where are we going to want to put that code? Without worrying about the details of how it's implemented, in terms of responsibility, where do we think is the most appropriate place that code should go and why? Instance methods really only make sense when you're talking about having an instance, but here we're talking about doing a general operation on movies without having a particular instance in mind yet. So yes. And then why would number 3 not be the right answer? Logic belongs in the model, right? This is logic about movies. It's going to contact a service about movies. It's going to digest information and create a movie object. Clearly, all that responsibility belongs in the movie model much more than it would belong in a controller. Good. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's actually look at what the user story might look like. It might look something like this when we write it in Cucumber. These are steps of the kind that you've seen before. So I can imagine a new thing would be when I fill in search terms with whatever and I follow search TMDB, then I expect to be wherever, a home page, search results. But let's say we have a new view for search results. Just from looking at the user story, we can identify some things that we're going to have to create to add to our app in order to make this user story possible, right? At a minimum, we're going to have a form with a search box because we've got a step that says when I fill in, so that implies the existence of a form with a thing that we can fill in and a search TMDB link or button or something that can be followed. And as soon as we know we have a form that we're going to submit, that means that there's got to be some controller action that will receive the form submission and do something with it. And based on what we've seen so far, probably some things that it will have to do, it's probably going to have to look in params. So we're going to have to make sure that the name of the form field that we use is going to match what the controller looks at. Then it's going to arrange to call the model to search TMDB because we just sort of decided that that's not the controller's job to do. The controller's job is to call the model and have the model do it. This is really important. So I'm going to say it again. Because it's not the controller's job to do it, it's the model's job to do it. When we're testing the controller, we don't care if find in TMDB works. We don't even really care if it exists. What we care about is that if it existed, the controller would try to call it. And if it existed and there's some specific arguments that it would expect, we want to make sure the controller is passing those arguments to it. But that is the boundary of what we care about in this test. We specifically don't care about the behavior of find in TMDB. That's not part of our job. Our job is to make sure the controller does its job, and its job is to make sure that it calls the correct method, passes the correct arguments, and does the correct thing with the results, which presumably it's going to take the results and make them available to whatever view gets rendered next. So the other thing we're going to have to do probably is display those results. We're going to say that we're going to create a new view to do that. So we're not going to write a lot of this code, but I really want to focus on this part about the boundary of the controller test is make sure that search TMDB or this find in TMDB method, which does not even exist yet, but we know we're going to have to write. We just want to make sure that the controller calls it correctly. And of course, because there's a new controller action, that means we have to add a route. But we know how to do all those things. So those things are no big deal. Okay, so let's go back and focus on this idea of find in TMDB, which is what I'm going to call the code you wish you had. And I warned you, I'm going to use this phrase a lot. So the controller is supposed to call a model method that will search TMDB for the movie. If it finds a match, then it's going to have this new search results view, which we're going to create, and it will somehow make the match information available so that that view can display it. If there's no match, then maybe we can redirect to the home page, but we're not going to worry about that today. We're going to just focus on doing steps 1 and 2. These steps are the happy path. So we'll do that later.